Do you have any examples of like a lesson you learned where it was like, oh, you saw this comedian do this thing and it really it illuminated some part of the writing process for you?
Sure, I have a lot of things like that. Well, one is that I remember so some early on things. I'll give you two early on things, and then one thing that I just saw the other week that got me kind of back in the writing loop. Early on, I started in the San Francisco Bay Area, and back at the time it was very segregated. The black scene and the white scene were totally separate almost. It was all San Francisco was kind of the white scene, and Oakland was kind of the black scene. But I would work all the different rooms, and I can still remember the gig I did where I learned when your rhythm and delivery is really right on. This is what I'm talking about. Why it was like the muffled laughter was messing with my timing a little bit. When it's really locked in, instead of it being a monologue that the comedian is delivering, it's actually a dialogue where the joke is one half of the conversation and the laughter is the other half, and the laughter informs how you deliver the next line. And the first time I ever realized that was working these black, mostly black rooms in Oakland. I don't know why. I don't know if that's just a coincidence, but I remember noticing that and being like, oh, wow, I can really play off their rhythm of laughter and deliver a line with a different rhythm afterwards. And that just clicked with me. There's that. So that was a big lesson in the beginning. Even just knowing that, like, if you insert pauses in certain places, that will trigger a laugh. And I remember I learned that, and I was like putting pauses everywhere for a while. I was like, oh, there's too many pauses, so then you have to cut it back.
Yeah.
So those are like big lessons that I learned probably within the first 5 years of comedy, like those two things, for example. And then just the other week, I went to see Ali Wong, who's a very good friend of mine. She and her opening act is this very funny comedian named Shang Wang. And me and Ali and Shang all moved to New York about the same time. So we're very close. And I went to see them at the where are they at the Beacon Theater the other week here in New York. And Shang, he's a really amazing writer. He's a great comedian. Shang Wang, you got to look him up. But he does a way of writing where it's not just the joke that's funny; it's the things leading up to the joke that are funny, and even things that aren't funny. He finds a funny way to say them just by choosing certain funny words. And remembering that that's part of writing, because like I'd forgotten, because the break from the pandemic really opened up like a big thing for me as far as writing goes.
Yeah, I mean, I love hearing all that because it's really interesting to hear all of, like the theory of comedy type things because like coming from music, I feel like music theory is very laid out, and obviously there's subtle things that you kind of figure out on your own that can't necessarily be put into words. But I feel like for a lot of beginning comics, that's kind of the lay of the land. Like a lot of it is not really out there, like just to read. Like there's stuff to read, but it's not like you can't just pick
Well,
out those skills so like easily.
well, I mean, there's a lot of things that are like I've read books. There's some I forget her name, Judy something I think. There's a book called The Comedy Bible, and there's another book on late night writing. And I was, I never took a class. I never read a book. I just kind of started learning, and and I just started doing it.
Yeah.
Trial by just dove into it. But I read these books. I'm like, wow, they really are articulating the different ways a joke can work.
Yeah.
Personally, I think there's so many. Here's another thing. I think there's too many comedians right now, and I think a lot of these comedians have learned it like formulas, and they learn it like math. They're not inherently funny people, but they decided to do comedy for I don't know what reason, and they're applying the formulas. And the real problem with there being too many comedians, is that everyone. I mean, if you can figure out the formula, you could write one or two decent jokes. They're not even. They're not even that bad. They're just not that good. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Is they're all kind of mediocre because if you put that formula, these different formulas into action, you can figure out how to write a joke. And whether that joke is really original and really funny and has the right twist or whatever to make it really pop, that's another thing. So there are those formulas that you can learn, and I use them too. But as far as like really having a funny essence and really being able to use those formulas to the greatest extent possible, that's something inherent, I feel like, to a certain extent.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously it's like a similar thing with a lot of aspects of comedy now, like podcasts too and everything, where it's saturated. And so
Yeah.
I can definitely see what you mean. How it's like the more visibility, like obviously there's gonna be more people reaching that height, but it's still definitely like a clear difference when you see someone who's been doing it for so long and is so seasoned. So it's just good to hear your perspective on all these things, like the lay of the land and the mechanics of the comedy.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I got real technical, but I've thought a lot about this stuff.
Oh, I'm sure.
I have like not funny, serious things to say about this funny art form. So sorry about that.
No, like I said, it's great hearing about it. One more thing on to backtrack to what you were saying about just like the funny way a comedian says something. This is something I've thought about before. Like, I was just curious if you have any other examples of someone whose wording is so important to like making something funny. Because for me, someone I've thought about before in that vein is the late great Brody Stevens. Because I feel like he'll take something that's like a non sequitur. It's not even necessarily. It's almost just like a fact that he's pulling out, but he says it in a way that the delivery just turns it into a joke.
Yeah, I mean, Brody, if you haven't checked him out, he's super hilarious. Rest in peace. But first of all, he had a very like unique way of speaking. So he had a very funny cadence. And then also he would pick things. He would also pick these random facts there's something about specificity is also a classic thing that's funny. Having a very specific example of something, because it paints a picture. The whole thing about it is kind of funny. Like I went to college and I learned to write in college, and I had to like kind of unlearn how to write like that because it's not funny language. So you use the right words to describe something. That's not funny. If you're using academic words, what you actually have to do is paint a picture, and a lot of times specificity will do that. So I'm sure he picks random facts or whatever like that, but it makes you picture something in your mind. That's always funnier than just using just regular words to describe something.
Yeah. Are there any other comics in that vein that you would think of? Like, obviously you gave the example of Sheng Wang, but is it like...
I mean, Attell's like that. I mean, Attell's like that, you know what I think he's like? He's kind of like that, that thing about that Hemingway tried to write the shortest story. These writers will have these contests to try and write the shortest story, right? And he has this, what is it, the thing about him where it's like baby shoes for sale, never worn, right? And it's like he tells a whole story in a sentence. And I feel like, I mean, that's a tragic version of that. But Attell will do that in a funny way. He will just have a sentence, and you can picture there's a backstory, there's a whole world behind it, and it just kind of this whole world kind of explodes in your mind, and it's literally that short. It'll be a sentence. He moves on to the next one, but briefly you can see a whole world that happened before the sentence that he says, and a whole world that happens after it, because he's painted a full picture of a character.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that about Hemingway either. That's like, I mean, that's like profound, but also kind of hilarious to hear in this context.
He would do that, and also, who else would do that was Kurosawa, the director. Him and his buddies would like try and tell a story the shortest way possible too. And it's kind of cool, It's like it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean that's kind of like getting it deeper than it has to be. It's just about painting the picture of it, And I'd say like there's many other comics that do that, but it's like if you look out for what I'm saying, this painting the picture, you'll see it in probably most good comics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But again, it's interesting hearing your take on it, because I see what you mean in Attell, but I guess I didn't even think of him specifically when I was asking the question. But it's like you're absolutely right. Like there is like a powerful imagery in the way he kind of unwraps the joke.
And it's also just like word choice. Like that's what I mean, where it's like inherently funny. Like none of those books, those joke formulas, can't teach you what the funniest word to choose is in any situation. You know what I mean? Some words are going to be funnier than others. Sometimes it actually is about using like a academic word in like a non-academic, not an academic word, but like a fancy word in a not fancy setting.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like. Or sometimes it's just about the funniest sounding thing. Like what's the funniest dinosaur? I don't know, probably pterodactyl. Kind of, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I can't explain why, but it is. I think they're funnier than the other dinosaurs. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, man. One more thing on Attell before I move on to Catskills. It's just I can't stop thinking about it. One of my favorite lines from his album "Skanks for the Memories" is just when he said he's got a joke about approaching a woman at a bar, and he just throws in, just completely out of context for the joke, I'm wearing clogs. And like that
Yes.
alone is has nothing like to do with the rest of the joke, and just the fact that he adds like that word, like it's
Yeah.
one of my favorite lines of the whole album.
He's got a lot of lines like that, and you know what's I think important that he's got where they're just random like that, but they do paint the picture, but they're very random. And also, I think that line, if I remember correctly, because that is like probably my favorite comedy album of all time, is like I don't think that even line even gets a big laugh. There's a couple lines like that, or there's another line where he gets hit in the head by a horseshoe. And he goes, "Oh, you ruined my night vision." And I don't even know what that means. I've been meaning to ask him, like, what does that mean? He probably will be like, I don't know, I don't remember, whatever. But I think there's those lines like that they don't even really get a laugh from the audience that are so important to keep in, because people like us will pay attention to them on maybe when you listen to it the second time. It's those details that keep people coming back, because they're like, what did that even mean? Let me listen to this again. It still kind of doesn't mean anything, but you keep trying to attach meaning to it. I've got jokes I did a story for This Is Not Happening, jokes that kind of go over the crowd's head at the taping, that in the comments, multiple people are like, that was the best joke,
Yeah.
And it just goes to show, it's like sometimes you just got to like have faith in the joke and just put it down anyway,
Yeah, it's like you said, like the joke doesn't even really have to make sense. Like the night vision joke from Skanks for the Memories, like that hits so hard, but I don't like again. I don't know what he's even trying to say. It just
me neither.
but yeah, that's one of my favorite albums too. I mean, just like genius writing. But